Good evening, everyone. This is such a treat to join you in this special opportunity to sit in on our UC Berkeley class on Asian American policy and political engagement with our guest speaker, California State Assemblyperson Phil Ting. Assemblyperson Phil Ting was elected to the State Assembly in 2012, representing the 19th Assembly District, which spans the west side of San Francisco, as well as the communities of Broadmoor, Colma, Daly City, and parts of South San Francisco and San Bruno. But Phil is more than an elected official. He's a Bears alum. While at Cal, Phil took classes from the founders and first generation of the Asian American Studies program and Ethnic Studies departments such as Lingxi Wang, Ron Takaki, Elaine Kim, Xiaoling Wang, and Michael Omi, amongst others. After attending Harvard's Kennedy School of Government, Phil served as the executive director of the Asian Law Caucus in San Francisco, where I met him as a hate crimes intern while I was at UC Berkeley's PhD program in ethnic studies. During Phil's long and impressive public service work experience, he has worked hard to ensure that policy is aligned with the needs of the Asian American community. Today, it is my pleasure to introduce a longtime friend of Asian American Studies to our Asian American Studies class, Phil Ting. Thank you, and please join us in our conversation.
Thanks, Mike. It's so great to be here in front of your class. I took this class a number of years ago, this exact class, Asian American Studies 145, with Professor Michael Omi, and I remember how much of an influence the class, as well as really the content, shaped my thinking and really changed the trajectory that I had at Berkeley. Like many people coming into UC Berkeley, I didn't quite know what I wanted to do or to study. I originally came in as an undeclared student, like many people, with the idea that I was going to apply to business school. And after spending about a year or two at Berkeley, I made a decision that business school really wasn't the right thing for me. And I really had, a lot of fun, really had a lot of interest in different political issues, different policy issues, especially many of the issues that we continue to discuss today, whether it was around admissions. And at that point, one of the hot button issues that was really being looked at is whether or not there was a quota against Asian American students, not just at UC Berkeley, but really around the entire country. I also became very involved in faculty diversity issues and also actively supported the ethnic studies requirement, which eventually became the American cultures requirement at UC Berkeley. So to me, this department, this class has had such a huge influence on my life and really my career. I look at it and really am very, very thankful for all the former faculty members and really for the curriculum. And I'm just very thankful that I was able to go to a college that had a ethnic studies program. Because not every university, and frankly, most universities don't have an ethnic studies or an Asian American studies program. In fact, as you had mentioned, I went to graduate school at Harvard, and Harvard for the last 30 years has struggled to even get a course or two courses in Asian American studies. In fact, they finally were successful in getting a chair endowed, and they recruited Professor Tae-Koo Lee from UC Berkeley to really lead up that charge and to start up that program at Harvard. But this is, again, more than 50 years since the Third World Strike, more than 50 years since ethnic studies was started here at UC Berkeley. So Berkeley, again, is ahead of the times. And unfortunately, we see so many of the older institutions like Harvard and the Ivy League schools really be much further behind, frankly, in terms of this kind of work. Why is Asian American Studies so important? Well, Asian American Studies is so important because it's really about finding a place in history. For those of you who've read Helen Zia's book, She talks about Asian Americans missing in history. And what she means is you see so many historic facts and historic situations that Asian Americans were excluded from. I mean, one of the most famous is the picture at Promontory Point. And that's the point where the two railroads from the West Coast and the East Coast finally met. And as you know, many Chinese immigrants sacrificed their life, their livelihood to build that railroad from the Pacific out to Utah, where the two railroads met. Yet when the final picture was taken of all the people who had contributed to the building of the railroads in this great meeting of the two railroads, not one Chinese face, not one Chinese American was seen in the picture. We were, again, missing in history. And again, it's these contributions that are so important. These contributions, as we grow up in this country, as we live in this country, if we really can't see ourselves, we really can't see what we're doing, what's happening. It's just very, very difficult to understand what is our place in history, what is our place in America, frankly. And we talk about, again, more recently, starting to shape culture, American culture, starting to shape American literature. And we've been able to have a number of successes, especially in the literary field. And we're starting to see more success in culture, especially movies and television, but it's still a long ways from becoming mainstream. And how that impacts us is we, as we're taught in Asian American studies, we're taught of as perpetual foreigners. We're seen as never really truly American. How many of us have been asked where we're from? And then when we tell them whatever city we might have been born in the United States, which is Los Angeles for me, they ask me, where were you really from? And we know what that means is just another code to say that you are not really American. We want to know where your ancestors are from. And we see that in terms of how that manifests itself in terms of public policy as well. We saw what happened after Chinese built the railroads, and there was really not a need for more cheap Chinese labor. There was a fight to get Chinese Americans or Chinese immigration excluded. And so we had the one time in American history where a group of people were excluded from immigrating into this great country in 1882. We also saw when there's conflict between the United States and another country, whether it was in Japan, and we saw what happened was the resulting internment. We saw the U.S. conflict in Vietnam and how it really shaped the immigration pattern of many Southeast Asians coming into the United States. And we see that today as the U.S. and China have a tenser and tenser relationship, how that impacts us, especially during COVID. And we saw a huge spike and rise in anti-AAPI hate. We saw the fact that seniors were afraid of going to the grocery store, walking down the street, even in cities like San Francisco, where seniors were accosted, and during oftentimes a skirmish, maybe have died. And so we see these real unfortunate incidents. And that's why, again, Asian American Studies was so important to me, because it provided a historical context. It really provided historical understanding. We don't arrive at this point in history as if we were just sort of dropped into it. We have been led into it by many other past historic actions and historic facts. And history is very much a linear evolution. We get to this point based on actions and results of what has happened before us. And so why is this so important? Well, it's really, really important because ultimately we have the distinct honor of living in a democracy. And as you've all heard in the past, democracy is not a spectator sport. You absolutely have to be a political participant. And if you choose not to participate, then your voice is not heard. And so then when policies are made, when laws are written, when governmental actions are taken, your voice is not heard. And we see where that matters. When in the past we talked about the Chinese Exclusion Act or the Japanese American Internment, you saw a time when Asian Americans were excluded. They were absolutely not heard. And it's not just about political power and having a political voice for Asian Americans. It is absolutely also about educating everyone else. Too often, there's a perception that not only are Asian Americans foreigners, but that Asian Americans haven't made, where you see so many Asian Americans in higher education, you see so many Asian American lawyers and doctors and engineers. And really, as we know, we should be all proud of those successes, that really only is part of the picture. The other part of the picture is we have an Asian American community that is monolingual, doesn't speak English very well, comes to this country with very little education, and their economic opportunity, their ability to succeed is very limited based on their English speaking ability, but also based on their education. And what you see is oftentimes two Asian Americans, one where you have highly professional, highly educated, and then you have another where you have uneducated and very limited English speaking, and their economic opportunities are much more limited, primarily to the service sector. And this is really no different than what we're seeing in this country and in this state today, where you almost have two economies, one for the highly educated and one who are not. And that's part of the reason we see so much tension in our political system, where you see many people who just feel like they don't have opportunity. They don't have a way out. They don't really see how the future is going to get better for them and their family and their children. And I think that's why it's so important. Asian American studies, ethnic studies provides an opportunity to really educate this history, to let people know how did we get to this point in time, to provide an understanding that people talk about, the hot debate around affirmative action, and that affirmative action isn't needed anymore, because again, we don't have barriers to entry for people of color into education or into housing or into jobs. And for all of us who are people of color, we know that that's absolutely not true. And that while there may not be any more legal barriers, that there's still plenty of barriers to opportunity in any kind of situation. So again, that's why, to me, ethnic studies is so important. This is also an opportunity for us, because while it is good to reflect on our history and to really understand where we've been, we also need to meet the moment and face the challenges that are coming before us. So we need to understand, how does ethnic studies intersect with climate issues? How does ethnic studies intersect with all the housing and homelessness discussions of today? And how does ethnic studies intersect with all the public safety discussions today, where you talk about this huge spike in anti-AAPI hate, and that's seen as a reason to really ramp up greater police presence and greater presence amongst our peace officers. So again, to me, this this course is so important. It's really an honor for me to be here tonight. My understanding is, I know there's a couple questions from a couple students that I'm really excited to take and really look forward to. But again, thanks so much for allowing me the opportunity to speak to you. And really, it's just been an honor to be here. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Phil. And, that's such an important message with regard to being seen and having that history awareness through Asian American studies curriculum and ethnic studies curriculum in general. And we know the value of that. We've been exposed to it, and we understand how that's so important to improving climate and outcomes through that education. That's just so critical. So we do have some questions along those lines, and we really appreciate that amazing kind of background and public service perspective that you provide. And this being a public policy class, which you took years ago with Michael Chang, which I was actually, I believe I was one of his first GSIs, early GSIs, when he taught that class, GSI being a teaching assistant. It's also quite a privilege to not only to be able to lecture this class, but to have you join us as well, someone who's a such an ally and friend of Asian American Studies and Cal's Asian American Studies program and the AARC. So I do have some students that have some questions here, and some of them I think are having a little bit of issue getting on, but I'm trying to see who is on, whether or not Vicky. Is Vicky on quite yet?
Yes, I'm here.
There you are. Excellent. And you guys would figure it out.
Great.
Vicky,
And I think I'm hoping that when you ask your question, if you can turn on your camera, it'd be great to see you.
yes, that'll be great, Vicky, if you don't mind. Hello.
Hello. Should I ask my question right now?
Yes, please, Vicky.
Hi, Assemblyperson Ting. You have worked to increase resources in both public education and the AAPI community, and also to support emerging ethnic studies curriculum in California schools. So my question is, how will funds be allocated to support ethnic studies focused resources in schools in order to combat hate against AAPI and other communities?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. So just around ethnic studies and the high school requirement, which I was proud to support and proud to vote on in the 2021-2022 budget, we set aside $50 million for the development and implementation of the ethnic studies curriculum and $5 million for professional development and instructional material. So that was done a couple of years ago. Also, in addition, myself and other API Legislative Caucus members were proud to support the UC Berkeley Asian American Studies and Asian Diaspora Studies Department with $15 million. And we also had an additional $2 million, which kicked off this Asian American Research Center that we are here today with. Also, we supported the UCLA Asian American Studies program with another $10 million. And also $5 million for Asian bilingual teacher education. In addition, we championed a much larger block grant program to fight AAPI hate across the state. That resulted in an appropriation of over $200 million, the large majority of it going to nonprofits who are working with victims and also working with communities directly, whether it's to educate them, whether it's to do direct services, whether it's to do coalition building. We hope that this will make a significant impact, not just in our community, but really to stop the hate across California.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. And you know that aspect of coalition building is so important. And Phil, with your public service experience and also your experience as the former executive director of the Asian Law Caucus, I think that's such a important type of experiential guide to policy outcomes through those type of coalition networks that are so important to having allies to ensure that your bill is turned into actual legislation. Something which you're very familiar with working with. And so we have another question from a student with Atish Sunder, who has a great question. And that's related to this, broadly speaking, and how to align with Asian American interests, policy with Asian American interests. Atish, I see that you're a panelist. Are you able to speak? And you can turn on your video if you feel comfortable doing so.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah. Hello. So, hello, Assemblyperson Ting. My main question is, what tips can you suggest for Asian Americans trying to get into policy, and how should we go about?
Oh,
Looks like
yeah. Atish, we lost you a little bit. Looks like you're flying off into space, and you're like in a jet plane.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Is it good? Okay. Yeah. You want me to? I'll repeat it. So hello, Assemblyperson Ting. The main question I wanted to ask is like, what tips can you suggest for Asian Americans trying to get into policy, and how should we go about it effectively?
Great. I think that's a great question. So for me, I started being very active while I was a student at UC Berkeley. I was a member of a lot of student organizations, served on a number of academic committees. I spent a lot of time working around the issue of admissions in particular. And so I would encourage all of you, if there's a certain issue that you're interested in or want to work on, then I would definitely encourage all of you to take a look at that issue and find different volunteer opportunities, should there be any on campus at UC Berkeley. And that's what's great about Berkeley. There's so many different places you could go to work on a variety of issues. You are so lucky to be at a university that touches so many different issues. Having said that, if the issue really isn't on campus, but you want to say work in the community, you could definitely hopefully find time to work in the city of Berkeley or the city of Oakland, or even the city of San Francisco. I think there's a number of governmental agencies that are looking for internships and volunteers. I know that my office takes a number of volunteers. We've had a number of interns from UC Berkeley itself. Also, I would really pursue issues that you find of interest in looking at organizations that are working in those issues. I myself was interested in doing more community organizing. I spent a summer doing that. That led me to really look at different issues around affordable housing and looking at different nonprofits that build affordable housing or organize around affordable housing. So that was just my personal interest, which really led me into a career around housing and real estate. So again, I really encourage all of you to follow your passions, follow your interests. I know many of you may feel pressured to go to medical school or law school or get some sort of professional degree. But if that's not your interest, I really do encourage you to pursue other things. And you can tell your parents that you can absolutely support yourself and make a good living and still do very interesting work. You don't have to just pursue the degrees that people know about. So again, really thank you for that question.
Yeah, that's great context, Phil. We find that all students, particularly in this current economic market, have some concerns and some pressures, even as they're very passionate about public service and about ethnic studies, around choosing a career or a profession that has more kind of traditional income structure, et cetera. But ethnic studies is something that I have found to be very applicable to all areas. And it's like I tell students, even if you're a STEM major, for example, you can also bring your ethnic studies training into STEM, diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility type of committees, et cetera. They get really important knowledge and support from ethnic studies trained individuals like yourselves here in this class. And there are also many different ways to bring that knowledge into your workplace, aside from like an official committee, but just as a change advocate, someone to advocate for conversations that are teaching moments across your workplace, and it improves the climate across your workplace as well. But also just even in your own communities and outside of your work environment, in your personal context too, engaging with your locally elected officials, such as Phil here, in supporting certain outcomes that are based upon ethnic studies principles of fairness and historical accuracy. Thank you so much, Atish, and I hope you reach your destination safely. And we have another question here from Cindy. Cindy, are you on? Just want to make sure you're here.
Yes, I'm here.
Hello. Would you like to ask your question, Cindy?
Yes. Hello, Assemblyperson Ting. I'm Cindy, and it's very nice to have you here with us today. So my question is, with your experience as chair of the Assembly Budget Committee, what are the major physical challenges and opportunities facing California in the post-COVID-19 recovery phase?
I think it's a great question. We've been so fortunate that I've been very fortunate. I joined the legislature in 2012. And every year since then, our economy has expanded, our tax base has expanded, our revenues have expanded. So it's been a really nice time to serve in the legislature. I think the future is a little bit murky. We have the Federal Reserve fighting inflation by raising interest rates. So I imagine at some point the economy will soften, which means that potentially there will be less tax revenue, which means less money going to UC, going to K through 12 education, going to a variety of different programs that we very, very much care about. I think what we have to do is we've really increased the funding so significantly across the board on everything we care about, whether it's around healthcare, human services. When I say human services, I mean money for food, money for housing, just money for lower income families and individuals. That money has gone up significantly. We've also expanded healthcare across the board to almost everyone in the state. We still have a population of undocumented immigrants between 18 to 65 who still do not provide insurance for, but that's something that we will work to rectify and work to change that. Having said that, we also are out there fighting climate change. We know that we have a lot of deferred maintenance on our state buildings, as well as at our various universities. We have infrastructure issues around transportation, not just public transit, but also around our roads. So those are some of the major challenges. And again, we're also putting a significant amount of money towards housing and homelessness, supporting our local cities and organizations to build more housing for the homeless, but also to build more temporary shelter. So these are all some of the major challenges that we face. We're in a very good place. We have about a $37 billion reserve. That reserve is really there and meant for plugging holes of our key services should our revenues decline. And I feel like we're in a very strong place to keep supporting all the various programs that we really think are absolutely critical to help run the state. So thanks so much for that question.
Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Yes, and we have another question here as well. Would the next student like to ask the question?
Hello. Oh, wait, my video's not on.
Hi there.
I think my video's not working for some reason.
Oh, I can hear you there. And
Okay.
I'm asking on behalf of Nancy.
Yes.
Thank you.
So, how's Assemblyperson Ting? While you have been at the forefront of securing historic investments in the AAPI communities to combat the hate and have championed various progressive policies, critics might argue that legislative efforts can often fall short of their intended impact on the ground level. In light of your experience with the homeless crisis and affordable housing legislation, can you discuss the tangible outcomes that these measures have led so far, especially for marginalized groups, including the AAPI population? Thank you.
Thank you. Great
Thanks
question.
so much. It's a great question. And you're absolutely right. Quite often when we talk about the state primarily provides funding and resources to organizations or agencies who are really charged with implementing these programs. And ultimately, in particular around homelessness, there's really only two measurements that matter. One is how many people are we getting off the street? And then two, how many people are we getting into permanent housing? And while we've had a significant amount of success doing both, we unfortunately have way too many people continue to fall through the cracks and end up back on the streets. And so we are constantly taking a hard look at how we're doing. And unfortunately, we are just one player. There's the state, there's all the local governments, there's all the nonprofits who actually build the housing or support the housing. So again, we just passed another round of more funding where we are asking for more metrics back from everybody to really focus on those two issues that I talked about. One is how many people are we getting off the street? How many people are we actually putting into permanent housing? Because those are the ultimate measurements that people care about, and people will feel that things are getting better. So I think your point is excellent. Quite often when we appropriate money we don't really see the impacts for quite a while. I'll just give you an example. We have, over the last couple of years, significantly increased the amount of money to fund childcare. But in the ways that we've given the money, some families haven't been able to access the services, or sometimes providers haven't really been able to take advantage of the money and therefore not provide the services to the families. And so this last year, we focused on really doing what providers cared about the most, which is increasing the reimbursement rates. The reimbursement rates are the money that providers get for offering childcare to families that are lower income. So again, when you talk about communities that really face challenges, every day I'm very focused on our lower income and middle income families who are really struggling here in California, and trying to find different ways to support them and to make their lives better. Many of the programs that I mentioned, whether it's around public health or human services, are geared toward lower income families. We are very lucky in regards to housing and homelessness that Asian Americans have done to do better than many other communities. So it hasn't been as big an issue or as much of a focus, whereas other communities have really fallen behind and have really suffered disproportionately around the housing and the homelessness issue, whether it's the Latino or African American community. Statistics clearly show that those communities have a much bigger impact, have been impacted much larger on those issues.
Great, thank you so much. And we have a number of other questions as a follow-up to. I'm trying to see if Yunjin is online now.
Yes, I'm here.
Hello.
Thank you for your time, Assemblyperson. So my question might be a little bit long. So your legislative work has significantly impacted various sectors in California, from advocating for affordable housing and environmental standards to spearheading the fight against AAPI hate. Given your multifaceted approach to governance, how do you balance the immediate needs of your diverse constituency with the long-term goals of statewide progressive reform? And what strategies do you employ to ensure that new policies are both inclusive and effective in forecasting community resilience and economic vitality? Thank you.
Thanks for that question. It's very broad. I constantly challenge in particular my budget staff, to make sure that we are changing the lives of 40 million Californians every single day. And what are we doing to improve their lives and their situation? What I would say is we focus every day primarily on how do we impact the Californians who really feel like they're being left behind. We've increased the earned income tax credit so that working families can get a significant tax credit back to support them and their families. This tax credit is even greater whether they're paying taxes or not. So it could actually be greater than their tax liability. So it's money back in their pockets for key items, whether it's just food, groceries, rent, or perhaps it's because a car broke down or a washing machine broke down, and to make sure that they have money for critical items. I'm constantly focused on, are we doing enough from a progressive point of view? And what that means is asking the folks that have really done the best and done the most to sacrifice and help those who still are struggling in the state. And we have a very progressive tax system where the wealthiest Californians really pay the bulk of California's income taxes. And California's income taxes really results in almost 2/3 of our revenue. And so that's a very critical piece of the puzzle. Also, we want to make sure that, again, working families, low-income families are getting critical resources. So we're providing them with healthcare. We're providing them with childcare. We're trying to get them more educational opportunities. In regards to community colleges, lower income families and students get to go to community colleges for free. We've also been able to increase the amount of Cal grants to provide more support for lower income students who are going to UC or CSU. And so that's a constant focus to make sure that we are really providing economic opportunity for those folks that are struggling. We know that by doing that, we will impact the communities that are most disadvantaged, and those tend to be communities of color. While oftentimes Asian Americans get forgotten because people feel like we've just had it made. We have so many lower income Asian Americans and immigrant families who continue to feel like they are falling behind on the economic opportunities that they thought there were here in this country really aren't happening. So again, we are constantly focused on what are we doing for working families, and is there more that we can do to support them? So we build affordable housing. We've built more homeless shelters. We've really focused on trying to provide more food, more opportunities across the board for all those families.
Thank you, Phil. And I think it's so important, the message that you are sending with regard to the intersectionality and the complexity across the Asian American community. That's a core aspect of the data gathering and the demographic analysis of a policy class like ours here, where it's really important to keep track of what the demographics are across a range of issues, not just socioeconomic status, but language issues. And we have some questions. I'm bearing in mind the time. We have about 7 minutes till time. Actually, we have 10 minutes to time. Good. But we're bearing in mind some of these great questions that are coming in while we're looking at the time. So first, there's a really interesting question here. Given your work, Assemblyperson Ting, on simplifying the Cal Grant application process, and if you kind of touched upon some of these issues, how do you believe that these efforts contribute to the educational access for our very diverse Asian American community and the students, Asian American students? And what other measures, I hate to put in compound questions, but what other measures do you think are necessary to address educational equity?
I think it's a great question. So I think the bill that Anna is referring to is, I did a bill a number of years ago, earlier in my career in the legislature, where I realized a nonprofit organization brought to me saying half the high schools in California would automatically send student transcripts to the Student Aid Commission, and half of them would not. And so again, if you attended a high school that didn't send the transcript to the Student Aid Commission and you were eligible for Cal Grants, and again, Cal Grants are just based on income. So you are eligible or you're not eligible. It's very simple. But we had students who were eligible for Cal Grants not get it because they didn't turn in their transcripts. And so we made it a requirement across the state for every single high school to turn in those transcripts. And we know that thousands of students were impacted. And I knew one of them. One of them who did not get a Cal Grant happened to be interning in my office the year that I did the bill. And so I know that it provided greater educational equity and access. Another issue that we're seeing, and is very concerning, is the high rate of homelessness among students, as well as the high rate of food insecurity. So we have worked to fund UC, CSU, the community colleges, over $4 billion to build more housing at all the campuses. While that's not enough, it will definitely make a difference. And what's great is the universities have the ability to build housing faster than almost everybody else. And so we know that housing is a big problem. If you don't have housing, it's very difficult to study. It's very difficult to have educational access. Also, the huge issue around food insecurity. We provided more money for different universities to provide food on campus. I know that when I was on campus, it wasn't very common to have a food bank, even though I know that there were students who probably needed it. Now it's much more of a common issue. It's much more of a common service. And so I think those two critical issues provide greater educational equity, especially for those students who are struggling financially.
Great, thank you so much, and thank you for your efforts here as well. We always need representation to ensure that these type of efforts that are specific to a knowledge of the diversity within our communities are adequately aligned with policy outcomes and policy in general. So We have another question here, and let me see how to frame this up. With regard to there's a lot of policy in providing services to the unhoused into permanent housing and providing supports. What are some of the plans that you've seen that are effective to reintegrate folks back into, I guess, into the mainstream economy during this process and after?
I think it's a great question. So for most folks who are homeless, think of it as somebody who may be employed, maybe is struggling because maybe they had a health issue, they couldn't work for a while, maybe something happened financially, maybe their car got stolen or the car broke down. Many of those people will become homeless. A startling statistic is the fastest growing population of homelessness in California are seniors. So they're not the homeless that people think of, or frankly, that people fear. Quite often the people that people fear or are worried about are people who appear to have mental health issues, appear to have substance abuse issues, but that is not the fastest growing segment. So for folks that are, becoming homeless, quite often they just need a helping hand. They need to have some stability, to have their life stabilized, whether it's in a shelter, whether it's in permanent supportive housing. Sometimes a variety of organizations will reunite them with family or friends. Quite often that is the fastest way to stabilize their situation. I was talking to a homelessness service provider. They ran into a pregnant woman on the street. She's about ready to have her baby. But they realized that, her family had resources. Her mother was actually fairly well off. But they had become estranged. And so they worked to reunite the mother and the daughter. Rather than spending money on housing, they bought the daughter a car because she was in the Bay Area and her mother is in Mendocino, to drive back to Mendocino and live with her mom. And so that was the answer to how to solve that person's problems. So every situation is a little bit different. But I would let you know that most situations are poverty driven. They're folks who have trouble earning an income or staying afloat with income. So a lot of times it's getting them job training, helping them find ways to have income. But also one of the biggest challenges that we face right now is the increase in cost of housing. And so even if someone is in housing, they can't keep up with the rent increases, can't keep up with rent because of something that's happening one particular month. So again, we're very cognizant of trying to find emergency money, getting them immediate resources, because we know if we can keep people in housing, stop them from becoming homelessness, it's much easier to do that than to get someone off the street back into a house. Having said that, we know the toughest populations are really around folks that have mental health, substance abuse issues. That we know we need to have additional resources around mental health and substance abuse. It's a major issue. We know it's a major problem. So again, it's something that we continue to focus on. The state's challenges is we don't have enough mental health service providers, and we don't have enough beds at substance abuse facilities. So that's something that we have to continue to focus on and continue to grow and to support, because it's becoming a bigger and bigger problem.
Yeah, thank you, Phil. And that's that's such a kind of a visceral and important aspect of the kind of current experience in a lot of urban areas, San Francisco, but also in Berkeley. We do see unhoused, and the kind of stereotypical version of the unhoused is someone who has, as you noted, around that there are some presumptions around here that are not necessarily descriptive of the entire scope of unhoused persons, is that they may have mental health issues, or they may have drug addiction issues, for which we know that services are at this point something that we really are, as a city here in Berkeley, but also I think in San Francisco too, are really trying to ensure adequate services. That brings up a question, with regard to elders that you touched upon, that there are many elders in the Asian American community, some of whom have become unhoused or have income instability and housing instability. Policing and safety, and you've touched upon this, and your work on anti-Asian violence have become an important issue in general. The kind of notion of safety has become a real important, both a policy issue, but also a conversation topic and an advocacy issue, which includes both like physical safety, but also like safety from harassment, et cetera, and bullying. But with regard to policing and safety and elders, for the Asian American community, what type of policies relevant to policing do you think are relevant to Asian Americans or have been?
Well, I think Asian Americans care about safety as much as anybody else. So when they feel unsafe, they really look to the police and public safety officials to figure out what are some of the strategies to make our city, make our communities more safe. Well, I think the police play a very, very critical role in ensuring that people who perpetrate crimes are held accountable. I think that's absolutely critical. I think we do need to have more resources for our public safety officials, but also more support. And oftentimes that means really working hand in hand with our community. To me, quite often having a physical presence in a neighborhood is one of the first steps to having public safety. What we're seeing now in downtown San Francisco, where there used to be hundreds of thousands of workers every day, and you see empty office buildings, there's no question there's no wonder that people aren't feeling safe. It's not, people don't want to walk down an empty street, and especially now that as the evening gets later, it gets darker after 5 o'clock, people don't feel safe walking by themselves in that community. So again, I think there's a variety of different strategies. We work to fund victims around the anti-AAPI hate work, really funding community organizations to build up their presence, making sure that they educated people about what they could do, who they could call, where they could go for help, and also really strengthen the ability for community organizations to speak up for our communities across the state. I think that plays a critical role, because when a community can't ask for help, or doesn't know how to ask for help, or doesn't even know where to go, then really the services that are delivered really may not meet that community's needs. And so I think that's absolutely critical, having that voice. And I see that, Mike, I see Walter asked a question that I'd like to answer.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So
Walter asked that, with respect to my career, how have you worked to develop your knowledge, skills, or commitment after you left Berkeley? Has any particular skill been especially important? I would say that two of the most important skills, which sound like common sense, but that I would encourage you to develop, whether it's at Berkeley or in your work, are two things. One is your writing skills, and the other is your public speaking skills. Being able to communicate well, and be able to communicate to a small audience or a large audience is absolutely critical. And that will help you no matter whatever career you choose, whether you're a scientist, whether you're a doctor, whether you're a lawyer, whether you're a finance specialist. I think it's absolutely important. I chose jobs early on in my career that really focused on what kinds of skills I would like to learn about. I mentioned to you earlier, I was interested in affordable housing. When I tried to get a job in affordable housing, many of the nonprofits, they couldn't train me. And so they were reluctant to hire anybody that didn't have affordable housing skills. And so I was left with this quandary: how do I get affordable housing skills if no affordable housing provider will hire me? And so I ended up in the private sector. I worked in the real estate industry for about 6 years for large accounting firms and real estate firms, really learning real estate, finance, learned management skills. And those were some really great skills to learn, especially at a young age, that I've taken as my career grew, and as I've learned to manage people and to really understand what different issues and how they needed to be tackled. And so I would really say early on in your career, feel free to stretch yourself, expand your horizons, definitely go after issues that you're interested in, but don't get complacent. Focus on learning and figuring out what skills you want to learn. So early on, I learned skills around real estate finance. I learned financial skills in terms of just budgeting, organizing income statements. I learned different management techniques, and that really helped me as I became a manager myself. And then later on in my career, I worked in community relations for San Francisco State, where I really got to know the community around San Francisco State and San Francisco, which was really very helpful as I started to move toward elective office. And then when I was working for the Asian Law Caucus, everything that I studied in Asian American studies, all the issues that I really cared about, whether it's immigration or around workers' rights or tenants issues, were absolutely critical and helped me be successful for that organization. But frankly, when I took over the Asian Law Caucus, they were facing financial trouble. And so I would say being able to understand finances and make tough financial decisions immediately were really the most important skills for me in that job. But for you, for all your different careers, maybe some of you want to do more artistic careers. Maybe some of you want to be in more science-related fields. Maybe some of you are going to stay in the social sciences. I think really focus early on different skills that you're obtaining in each of your jobs. And I think don't be afraid to move on if you feel like you're feeling stagnant or you're not really learning a whole lot, or you just feel like I've learned what I can and I'm not seeing opportunities for growth. Maybe it's time to try something else. So again, especially in your 20s, is a great opportunity to explore and to really learn different skills. So thanks so much for that question, Walter.
Yeah, I love that question. And that's really for young people, following the example of someone like Phil, who really, stretched his wings and sought out different positions, not because of the position per se itself, but through a search for skills development, and through that, developing a sense of your own self-awareness of what type of job you want to throw your passion at, and how that engages with your personal life too, and your identity as a whole person. We try not to make our jobs, everything about us, and they're not. There's many components, and in your 20s, you have the opportunity to really kind of seek your passion, so to speak. And we've got a great question in that sense that, Phil, you came from the financial sector, which some of the students here are interested in, and some of them may be involved in both policy or finances more directly. How has your expertise in the financial sector informed your strategies around addressing economic inequity and access issues for Asian Americans and other marginalized communities?
Thanks, Mike. I think it's such a great question. To me, so often, economic inequity is really about a lack of access to resources. So the real question is how do we get the resources to the people who need more help? So to me, whether that was really ensuring that we had greater educational access, whether it was around K through 12, and now it's TK through 12, so transitional kindergarten through 12, whether it's around early education and getting more access to preschool. Well, studies show the earlier you can get children into preschool, the earlier you can change, or the earlier you can get children reading, it really changes their educational trajectory. So how do you get them into schools earlier and get them educational access earlier? And that goes back straight to childcare as well, because oftentimes some of their earliest educational experience is really in a childcare setting. It also really is about making sure that they get access to housing, access to food, access to money and resources. Quite often what we've done is really look at lower income people and treat them like criminals, like we don't trust them, like we assume that everybody who asks us for help is perpetrating a fraud. And if you feel like If you can imagine going into a store where you're buying something, whether it's you're buying a pen, you're buying some chocolate, you are buying some clothing, and that you were treated as if you were a criminal there to steal the clothing, steal the chocolate, or steal the pen, how you would feel. You probably wouldn't ever want to shop at that store again. But that's exactly, unfortunately, how government treats people, because we have this one rare instance, or these rare instances where there is fraud that's being perpetrated, unfortunately. And because of that, we spend all our time making sure that lower income people and middle income people aren't stealing from us, versus when we give wealthier families tax breaks, there's very little oversight of that. In fact, you see the Republicans in Congress pushing back around IRS enforcement. So while they're for stopping fraud for poor people, they definitely are not for stopping fraud for rich people. And so again, these are things that you really have to think about in terms of finances. So for me, what I learned about finances, I didn't want to focus on only dollars and cents. It was all about economic redistribution and making sure that folks that needed help could get the money and resources they could. So it's really learning those skills, but understanding what communities are you really trying to help. And to me, when I think about my career as elected official, I often think about many of the clients we used to serve at the Asian Law Caucus. We served sweatshop workers or restaurant workers who weren't getting paid. They weren't getting paid minimum wage. They weren't getting paid overtime. Oftentimes we would file wage theft claims against them. In fact, there's a story today about a restaurateur who just had to pay a very significant amount of money to the state for wage theft to their employees. We represented tenants who lived in single room occupancy hotels in Chinatown, who really couldn't speak English, had trouble getting their units fixed up to code, and really constantly were being harassed around eviction and paying their bills. And so I think about those folks. I think about people who were struggling to stay in this country as immigrants, and they were fighting and having challenges getting their immigration papers and getting their green cards and getting their citizenship. So I think of those families that really are struggling and who are working very hard. I would say maybe 30, 40 years ago, when you look at people who are homeless, most of them probably weren't working. Today, so many people who are homeless are working, not just part-time, but they're working full-time. They just aren't making enough to be able to afford the high rents in this state or in this region. And so to me, it's really about, okay, what do we do to bring those costs down? What do we do to build more economic opportunity for everybody? And part of that is really understanding how finances work and really where the money should be going. So I'd encourage you, for those of you who are interested in social justice, in social change, a key component which many people do not focus enough on is money and resources. And quite often, if our communities don't have the resources, it's very difficult for our communities to be economically strong.
Thank you so much, Phil. I think this is a good way to kind of wrap up this amazing conversation. This concept that Phil has lived through his public service and the type of legislation and policy that he on a daily basis advocates for. This notion of financial security in the context of financial equity, this broader notion of community and inclusivity. This idea that all boats rise with a tide, I think is so important to the type of policies that would be directly aligned with a community specific to Asian Americans that is so complex and diverse across socioeconomic status, for one, but amongst many others, including language and sending country histories, et cetera, and experiences. So this was fantastic, and we so much appreciate, Assemblymember Ting, you're spending your time with our class and this conversation, and much appreciation for your work and for your work towards Asian American studies as well. Everyone can give.
Thanks, Mike. And just one final point. I mean, so many of the things that we talked about tonight are paid for by taxes. And so while many of you probably don't spend much time thinking about your taxes, your parents and your grandparents probably do. but just realize that the education you have at Berkeley is paid for or supported by taxes. Many of the key services, whether it's the buses, the sidewalks, whether it's BART, are paid for by taxes. And taxes are how we end up asking for people who really have the most money to give back and give those who are really struggling the services. So that's a real key component. I just want to make sure I hammer that home because I think that is so important. People love all the services that taxes pay for, but somehow they don't always love the taxes. So I just want to make sure that you understand that those two are completely linked and they're absolutely critical to be able to do both. So again, Mike, thanks so much for having me at your great class. Really thanks to the Asian American Research Center for hosting us tonight and for the great work that they're doing. And it's great to always be back at UC Berkeley. Go Bears. And thanks to all the students who joined us tonight. Really appreciate all of you for spending part of your Thursday evening with me. So thank you.